Hey, what's going on? Ryan here with Intersection Records. And today we're talking about the great Roy Orbison, a great singer, great composer and songwriter. Elvis Presley loved his voice and thought he was one of the great singers of all time. He's a Texan. He was born in 1936, passed away at the age of 52, had career ups and downs, big hit singles. And we're talking a little bit about his career. And, my second concert ever was Roy Orbison in December of 1984. So 40 years ago this December, I went with my parents and my brother to a theater in St. Louis called the Fox. And they had a series of concerts. And I guess my parents couldn't find anybody to go with, so they took their 11-year-old kids, or I guess I had just turned 12 on the 7th of December of the 84. And it was a great show. It's funny looking back at that time. He was younger than I am now. He was 48 years old. And my dad was kind of teasing that he was, pretty robotic. He didn't do a lot of moving on stage, almost like he was being propelled by strings. And to think that, he was an old-time rocker then, but really, as we aged, he was pretty young. He was 48 years old and died at 52, unfortunately. Again, born in Vernon, Texas. His father gave him a guitar at the age of 6. And he said by the time he was 7, rock and roll music or not rock and roll music, but the guitar and music was all he could think about. Again, born in 36, by 1943, there is no such thing as rock and roll. But there is country and western music. He growing up was a fan of Hank Williams, but more importantly, Lefty Frizzell was a hero. Lefty Frizzell singing and phrasing. He became a fan of country and western and rockabilly as a teen. In 1956, at the age of 20, he was signed by Sam Phillips at Sun Records, and that's the same record company that did Elvis and Johnny Cash. From 1960 to 1966, he had 22 Billboard Top 40 hits. He had a ton of top 10 songs as well. Only the Lonely in 1960. Running Scared in 61. Crying, one of my personal favorites, in 61 also. In Dreams. These songs were complex structurally. They weren't just verse, chorus. There was pre-choruses and bridges and all kinds of things. In Dreams is a great example of a song that's not easy probably to sing or to write, and there's lots of things going on in it. And then, of course, Oh Pretty Woman was written by Orbison, co-written in 1964, and that's really his signature song, right? Unfortunately, on June 6th of 1966, his wife was killed in a car crash. 2 years later, while on tour in England, he had a house fire at his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and 2 of his sons were killed in the fire. Just tragedy. Again, 1966, Johnny Cash ended up buying that property and planting an orchard there. And, the 70s were rough for a lot of the guys from that era. He did have some opening slots for the Eagles. Linda Ronstadt did a great version of Blue Bayou, which is a great Orbison song. Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris did the Love Hurt version that Orbison kind of made famous. His version is kind of what Graham Parsons was taking from, even though that song had been done by the Everly Brothers and other people. Nazareth, right? In January of 78, he has a triple bypass surgery. And again, the 70s are rough on a lot of these guys. But 1980, Don McLean records a version of Crying that goes into the top 5. And, he performs on the Dukes of Hazzard in 1981, the show that was pretty popular, right? Van Halen covers Pretty Woman off their Diver Down album in 1982. He wins a Grammy with a duet with Emmylou Harris early in the 80s on That Lovin' You Feelin' Again. And then the movie Blue Velvet, David Lynch's movie Blue Velvet, does a version of Orbison's In Dreams. Dennis Hopper's kind of using that as his theme song. Ultimately, he's inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 87 and the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame in 87. Again, I saw him in December of 84. I remember being in the backseat of my mom's car going, I remember where I was. We were probably going to the grocery store, and Crying came on the radio. And it was probably around, the early 80s, probably even before I saw him. And just remember hearing this guy, and even as a young person, the vulnerability. Think about the early 60s and the songs, and what are guys singing about? Fast cars and picking up girls and machoism and being cool. He's talking about breaking down and crying, and not being able to control it. Songs like Only the Lonely. Only the lonely know the way that I feel tonight, Not many people were doing what he was doing. Anyway, he did some tribute concerts with Springsteen and Katie Lang and Jackson Browne. And, in 1987, he started collaborating with Jeff Lynne. And Lynne had been just finishing up George Harrison's record Cloud 9 that kind of brought Harrison back into popularity. And they decided to go to lunch. So Jeff Lynne and George Harrison and Roy Orbison go to lunch, and they decide that they're going to call Bob Dylan to use his studio, and maybe they're going to work on a project. Well, on the way to the studio, to Dylan's studio, Harrison goes by Tom Petty's house and picks up one of his guitars. And by the end of the night, they've written the song Handle Me With Care, right? Handle with Care. And it brings all those guys back into the forefront. Dylan's got a hit, Jeff Lynne's got a hit. George Harrison and Roy Orbison have a hit. I'm So Tired of Being Lonely, Great song. Around the same time in 1988, he does his last album, Mystery Girl, and it has a big hit on it, You Got It. He did a concert in December 4th of 1988 in Ohio, returned home to Hendersonville. 2 days later, on December 6th, 1988, he was at a buddy's house flying model airplanes. They went inside and had dinner. He excused himself to go to the restroom and collapsed and died of a heart attack at the age of 52. In December of 88, in January of 88, You Got It was released as a single. It rose to number 9. He has the Wilburys Volume 1 album on the charts, and his own solo album, Mystery Girl, enters the charts, both in the top 5. And it's the first time since Elvis that a posthumous or deceased artist has 2 different albums in the top 5 at the same time. And that was in April of 89. Roy was a great voice, an inspiration. Again, a guy that didn't necessarily have to follow trends, didn't write bubblegummy pop songs that were 3 chords. He was a complex arranger and composer, and certainly an operatic singer. Those are my thoughts. Check out my channel. We do shows every single day. Peace out. See you.